In just 43 seconds, $27 million in classified intelligence budgets. Senator Cory Booker didn't raise his voice. He leaned forward with the precision of a prosecutor who had found the smoking gun. Cameras zoomed in on his face, then cut to Kash Patel's hands gripping the witness table. The Senate chamber held its breath. What did Booker uncover about Epstein's files that made the FBI director's carefully constructed defense collapse in real time? At exactly 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday that would redefine government accountability, the mahogany-paneled Senate Judiciary Committee room buzzed with the electric tension of impending revelation. 23 reporters sat in the gallery, their fingers poised over keyboards. The afternoon light streaming through tall windows cast long shadows across the witness table, where Kash Patel sat like an investigator who had seen too many lies, but today found himself on the receiving end. Senator Booker walked in like a man carrying the weight of classified truth. His navy suit was pressed, his expression unreadable, but those who knew him recognized the subtle tension in his jaw that appeared when he was about to deliver devastating questions. Across from him, Patel adjusted his red tie and straightened a stack of FBI case files before him, encrypted USBs visible in his briefcase. The hearing had been routine until this moment. 3 hours of standard questioning about FBI budget allocations, cybersecurity protocols, and domestic terrorism threats. Patel had handled each inquiry with the rapid-fire precision of a man who lived in legal jargon, interrupting questions with evident citations and sharp glances that reminded everyone he had built his career on exposing government secrets. But Booker had been waiting, watching, building toward this single moment. Director Patel, Booker began, his voice carrying the measured cadence that made senators lean forward. I want to discuss your handling of certain classified files that came into FBI possession following Jeffrey Epstein's death. The room temperature seemed to drop. Patel's knuckles went white as he gripped his water glass. Senator, I'm not sure what specific files you're referring to. The FBI has handled all Epstein-related materials according to. I'm referring to the 807 pages of financial records, flight logs, and correspondence that were transferred to FBI headquarters on September 12. Booker's interruption was surgical. Records that detail $127 million in transactions between Epstein's various shell companies and certain government contractors. Cameras pivoted between the two men. Patel's face drained of color as he realized this wasn't a fishing expedition. Booker had the receipt. Senator, those materials are part of an ongoing investigation, and I cannot comment on. Cannot comment? Booker's voice rose for the first time, cutting through Patel's deflection. Or will not comment because those files contain evidence of surveillance contracts between Epstein's network and private intelligence firms that were later hired by the Trump administration. The chamber froze. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the cameras stopped their mechanical humming for a moment as operators realized they were witnessing a nuclear political moment. Patel sat in silence for exactly 4 seconds, the kind of silence that makes careers end and investigations begin. Senator, I defended this nation's intelligence apparatus with honor. Director Patel, Booker interrupted, pulling out a manila folder. Should I show the committee document 847A, which details a $3.6 million contract between Epstein's Zorro Trust and Palantir Technologies, dated just 6 weeks before you joined the National Security Council? Patel's face went ashen. His legal advisors, seated behind him with their American flag pins and desert expressions, began furiously scribbling notes. At exactly 2:20 p.m., 43 seconds after Booker's opening salvo, something incident happened. FBI Deputy Director Sarah Chen, who had been sitting quietly in the observer section, stood up. Her mesmen was so unexpected that security personnel initially moved toward her, thinking she was a disruption. But Chen wore her FBI credentials prominently, and her face carried the expression of someone about to detonate their own career for the truth. Senator Booker, Chen said, her voice carrying across the chamber. I have information relevant to your inquiry. The chamber erupted. Chairman Durbin banged his gavel repeatedly, demanding order. Patel spun in his chair, his eyes wide with what looked like genuine shock and growing panic. Director Patel told me 3 weeks ago that those Epstein files had been transferred to an off-site facility for national security reasons. Chen continued, her voice steady despite the chaos. But yesterday, I discovered they were actually sent to a private contractor in Virginia. The same contractor that received $47 million in no-bid surveillance contracts during the previous administration. Twitter exploded within minutes. Epstein Files was trending globally within the hour. Fox News cut from their regular programming. CNN broke into their afternoon coverage with breaking FBI whistleblower exposes Epstein file cover-up. Patel attempted to respond, his voice cracking. Deputy Director Chen is clearly mistaken about the classification telecols. I have the transfer orders, Chen interrupted, holding up a document. Signed by you personally, Director Patel. Bypassing standard FBI archival procedures and sending classified materials to Cipher Dynamics, LLC. Booker leaned back, allowing the moment to breathe. He had orchestrated this perfectly, but even he seemed stunned by Chen's decision to blow up her career in real time. Deputy Director Chen, Booker said carefully, are you stating under oath that Director Patel deliberately moved evidence related to Jeffrey Epstein's intelligence activities outside FBI custody? Yes, Senator, and I have documentation showing that Cipher Dynamics received $89 million in contracts from various government agencies between 2019 and 2024, with many of those contracts awarded during Director Patel's tenure in various national security positions. The revelation hit like a tsunami. Patel's carefully constructed reputation as a deep state fighter was crumbling in real time. The man who had built his career exposing government corruption was now being exposed as potentially orchestrating the largest evidence tampering scandal in FBI history. At 2:24 p.m., Senator Ted Cruz attempted to defend Patel, arguing that national security considerations sometimes required unconventional handling of sensitive materials, but Booker was ready. Senator Cruz raises an important point about national security, Booker replied smoothly, which is why I'm curious about why these particular files would be sent to a private contractor whose board of directors includes 2 former Epstein associates and 3 executives from the Trump Organization. The final blow landed with devastating precision. Patel slumped in his chair, his hands trembling as he reached for documents that suddenly seemed useless. His evolution from confident FBI director to exposed conspirator had taken less than 7 minutes. Director Patel, Booker continued, given Deputy Director Chen's testimony and the evidence of financial connections between Epstein's network, private contractors, and your own career trajectory, do you still maintain that the FBI has handled these materials appropriately? Patel's response was barely audible. The procedures we followed were, I believe they were in the nation's best interest. Whose nation? Booker asked quietly. And whose interests? The hearing room fell silent except for the clicking of cameras and the frantic typing of reporters filing the story that would dominate headlines for months. Senator Lindsey Graham, visibly shaken, leaned into his microphone. Director Patel, this committee needs to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. Are you telling us that classified materials related to a deceased federal prisoner were moved to a private contractor without congressional oversight? Patel's response was a study in political disintegration. His voice, usually commanding and precise, cracked as he spoke. Senator Graham, the operational security considerations required. The materials in question contained sources and methods. He trailed off, realizing that every word was digging his grave deeper. Chairman Durbin seized the moment. Director Patel, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you personally authorize the transfer of Jeffrey Epstein's financial records to Cipher Dynamics without informing this committee or following standard FBI protocols? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Patel looked to his legal team, then to the ceiling, then finally back to Durbin. Mr. Chairman, I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights regarding that specific question. The chamber exploded. The FBI director had just pleaded the Fifth in front of Congress about handling evidence in the most notorious criminal case of the decade. Reporters were literally running from the gallery to file breaking news alerts. Deputy Director Chen, still standing, added fuel to the fire. Mr. Chairman, I should also note that Director Patel's decision to move these files came just 3 days after a private meeting with representatives from Cipher Dynamics, a meeting that was not logged in his official calendar. Within hours, protests erupted outside FBI headquarters in Washington. By evening, Patel resign was trending Anzeinsing Epstein truth. Cable news channels cleared their schedules for wall-to-wall coverage of what analysts were calling the most explosive government accountability moment since Watergate. At exactly 6:43 p.m., as news networks scrambled to process the day's revelations, another bombshell dropped. Investigative journalist Glenn Greenwald released documents on Twitter showing that Cipher Dynamics had received contracts totaling $807 million across multiple agencies during Patel's various government positions. The thread went viral within minutes. 3.0 The Patel-Epstein files aren't just about evidence tampering, they're about a systematic network of surveillance contracts that made private companies rich while keeping Congress in the dark. The documents showed wire transfers, meeting logs, and encrypted communications between Patel and Cipher Dynamics executives dating back to 20. Most damaging was an email from Patel to Cipher CEO Marcus Webb. The materials we discussed need to be processed outside normal channels. Too many eyes in federal facilities. Senator Elizabeth Warren immediately called for criminal charges if the FBI director moved evidence to help private contractors hide their connections to Jeffrey Epstein. We're not just talking about corruption, we're talking about obstruction of justice on a massive scale. By 8 p.m., Attorney General Merrick Garland was facing calls from both parties to appoint a special counsel. Republican Senator Tom Cotton, usually a Patel ally, told Fox News, I defended Kash Patel for years, but if he used his position to cover up Epstein connections while enriching private contractors, he needs to resign immediately. The political earthquake was just beginning. As evening turned to night, FBI field offices in 12 cities reported that agents were requesting transfers out of headquarters assignments, citing compromised leadership and loss of institutional integrity. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, when the FBI director can't explain why Epstein evidence went to Trump-connected contractors, every American should be asking, what else are they hiding? Senator Rand Paul joined calls for a special prosecutor. If true, we're looking at FBI weaponization for private interests connected to one of America's most notorious criminals. FBI agents nationwide began coming forward with concerns about political interference and evidence tampering. The revelation had opened a floodgate of accountability that Patel couldn't contain. The moral implications were staggering. If Booker's evidence proved accurate, it meant that files potentially containing evidence of abuse, corruption, and intelligence operations had been deliberately moved outside federal custody and into the hands of private contractors with financial and personal connections to both Epstein's network and political operatives. Deputy Director Chen, despite facing potential career destruction, had chosen truth over institutional loyalty. Her decision to publicly had shifted the entire trajectory of American law enforcement accountability. That evening, As Washington processed the day's revelations, one question dominated every conversation. What else was hidden in those files, and who else knew they had been moved? Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't a badge or a subpoena. It's truth, archived and revealed at the right second. Today, Senator Booker wielded that weapon with surgical precision, and the reverberations will be felt for years to come. What happens when a leader who built power on exposing secrets is undone by evidence of hiding them? If patriotism can't survive transparency, was it ever real? The Epstein files represent more than just evidence of one man's crimes. They potentially hold the key to understanding how intelligence networks, private contractors, and government officials created systems of surveillance and influence that operated outside democratic oversight. Director Patel's career was built on the promise of draining the swamp and exposing deep state corruption. The irony that he may have been orchestrating the very kind of evidence manipulation he claimed to oppose will not be lost on history.